welcome to Plaid's Tech Talk. It's great to have you here on this slightly snowy and sleety Tuesday afternoon in Toronto. We're going to be talking about Plaid's launch of our wonderful IDV product and how to meet FINTRAC requirements using it. Just some housekeeping to kick us off. David and I will talk for a little bit about the product, give you an overview of a couple of things. We will be leaving time at the end for Q&A. So pop your questions in the Q&A widget and we will keep track of them and we will do our best to answer them at the end. If we don't have time to get through everything, please just reach out to us and we'll make sure you get the information you need. And then the other thing, just to let you know, we'll be recording today's session and we will be sharing a copy of the recording and a copy of the deck to everyone that registered afterwards. All right. So just a brief intro about us and about Plaid. So for those of you who don't know, Plaid is an open finance network, and we connected over 7,000 companies, helping them acquire and activate clients in using their digital financing tools. I am part of the Plaid Canada team. I lead our financial institution partnerships, working on our data supply and our partnerships with banks. I have a very soft spot for IDV, having helped build a couple of similar products in Canada before. And I'm looking forward to today. David?
Hi, I'm David. I am part of the identity verification team here over at Plaid. I was part of an acquisition Plaid made earlier this year or early last year, pulling in a full suite compliance solution into the Plaid network. I cover Canada strategy. So yeah, we're excited to chat about it today. All right, so let's talk about what we're covering today. Who is this for? It's for product folk, risk, compliance leaders looking to grow their user base and looking at the different methods within Canada you can use to verify your users in the most efficient and compliant way possible, right? And so today you're going to walk away with what are the options when you're verifying users and how can you leverage Plaid to help support that? Understanding the 3 FINTRAC compliant ways to verify users through Plaid and the advantages of using a full suite solution like Plaid to not only verify your users, but also then connect the bank accounts. And yeah. So today in Canada, what does identity verification look like? Right. And so we've worked with a lot of partners in both US, Canada, abroad, in many different areas. And really what we're seeing in Canada specifically, right, is that the majority of clients are using document and selfie verification. Now, that's a fine way to verify users, but it does offer a lot of friction for the individual. So the pass rates can be improved, right? Often, if you're only offering document and selfie verification for digital onboarding, it's a subpar user experience and it impacts pass rates. So how do we improve upon that, right? Instant verification can become costly. If you're looking to do a non-documentary route yourself, there's a lot of cost in plugging into the credit bureau data sources, and not just in that vendor relation, but also in the ongoing maintenance and the development period of that. What we also see in the Canadian market is that a lot of financial services still rely heavily on KBA or knowledge-based authentication. That is a pretty archaic way to verify users in this day and age. And there are a lot better tools to supplement fraud prevention and how can you leverage that without adding friction in your verification process. And finally, what we're seeing is that because of these legacy solutions that a lot of Canadian clients are using, what happens is they'll start using one vendor and then they'll bring on another vendor, and then another vendor, another vendor. On average, we're seeing 6 to 12 and oftentimes even more vendors involved in the onboarding flow, the fraud prevention flow. And what it does is it really causes a lot of back-end issues because these systems don't speak well to one another, and you're creating a lot of long tail issues And we've seen time and time and again, financial institutions being fined by regulatory bodies because either their systems are out of date or they're so sensitive that they start ignoring certain hits, or their back-end processes just become so burdensome, right? So these are the overall things that we see. Mark, do you have any other insight here?
Yeah, so my take on this is really like these lead to also negative overall business outcomes, right? They make acquisition difficult due to increased friction. They make cost of acquisition more expensive because of the managing of the different vendors of piecing all the pieces together. If you don't have ongoing and good fraud controls, those are going to affect your margins on an ongoing basis. And being a recovering lawyer, I would say, and having some experience in this and former part of my professional life, there is a tail regulatory risk if you do not have a robust system that expresses itself in regulatory enforcement down the road. And those types of things, you don't know when they're coming. They become all-encompassing, especially if you're a small company with few resources, and they can be very expensive. So those are the reasons why they matter, sort of in a broader context from my perspective.
Got it.
So just to sort of provide a bit of a benchmark, or should I say a regulatory context in which to look at Plaid IDV. I'm guessing folks on this call, if you're listening in, you're either using a product already, or you're working in an environment where you're fairly familiar, but we thought it was useful just to sort of review them very quickly at the beginning. So in Canada, if you are opening a financial account or if you're moving money, you very likely have to comply with pieces of legislation that relate to anti-money laundering. And very specifically, if you're confirming their identity, there are 5 methods that FINTRAC, the regulator, sets out. I'll just note here that this is not legal advice, so please don't take this as gospel. And we encourage you to talk to a lawyer or somebody else to make sure that you're fully meeting requirements. It's just meant to be an overview. So 2 of these methods are not applicable here. Those relate to relying on somebody else's processes. But the 3 that relate to our product are credit file. So that's connecting to a Canadian credit bureau and confirming certain pieces of information. The second one is what's called dual process, which I think a lot of you may be using currently, where you compare data elements from 2 quote unquote reliable sources. Reliable sources are things like bank accounts and utility bills. It's not a rigid list, but there are sort of a cluster of things that people generally view as reliable. And then the last one is authenticating a piece of government photo ID, which has a lot of good things about it, in that it has a picture associated with it and a few other things. But as David mentioned, it can affect the user experience sometimes. It affects what we call conversion, which is the time it takes for a user to get all the way through your flow. And David's going to get into it now, but the short strokes is that the Plaid product will give you credit file, dual process, and government ID, and give you some flexibility to choose how you want these things to work in the context of your particular product.
All righty. And also, Mark, what a lawyer answer to say that this is not a lawyer response. Alrighty, so let's dive into how Plaid can help solve your verification and compliance needs, right? So Plaid offers a full suite compliance solution, meaning we help piece in the different parts of the verification process that you need. So we start with the FINTRAC compliant identity verification, right? And that's 3 different types of verification. We offer the document verification. We offer a database verification, which includes the credit file and dual process method. And then we offer a selfie verification. From there, we underpin that with multiple different fraud engines. So as I was mentioning before, KBA is an antiquated way to prevent fraud. What people are looking now are things like behavior analytics, email markers, IP address, things like that. That feeds into a fraud model that actually is preventative versus prohibitive. And then watch list and PEP list screening. So looking at AML watch list, sanction list, PEP list, making sure that your users are not on any terrorist watch list, right? And then stitching all of that together and offering a dashboard, this back-end office compliance solution that we are piecing together for you and feeding all of those necessary components into one 360 view for your back-end team. What we often see is because a lot of our clients who come to us, we're layering so many solutions and having to stitch them together, they don't speak to each other well, right? They don't feed into one another well. And because we're doing that for you, you can know that when you have that 360 view of a user, you always have the most accurate understanding of where they are in the funnel and if they are a potential bad actor. And so if we dive into each of these sections, the first piece will be the verification aspect. And so one system, 3 FINTRAC compliant methods. So our data source verification encompasses both the dual process method and the credit file method. And so what we're doing here is your user will enter their PII, so name, date of birth, address, SIN, and phone number. We'll take that user PII and verify that information for you. And so that usually is the first line of defense for verification. And in the case that a user fails that, then they move on to documentary, right? And just that small change of verification method from a document selfie to data source has shown to greatly improve the conversion for our clients, right? They are, if you think about a user who is signing up, it's much easier to just enter your PII than then go grab your passport or go grab your driver's license or anything like that, right? So this way, we try to make it as easy as possible for your good users. And if they fail that piece, you can intelligently have our system fall back to documentary and selfie, right? And so you're able to use these in a modular fashion based off of what makes most sense for your business. And maybe you have different needs per business line, but we can work with you to customize that experience and make sure it works in the best way possible. All righty. And so underpinning all this, right, if we're reducing friction in your verification flow, that doesn't mean we want to open all the floodgates to every bad actor out there. In fact, we need to improve that fraud detection model, because if you reduce friction, the possibility of more bad actors coming in is higher. So how do we increase your ability to deter fraud? And so you do that by monitoring and looking at thousands of different flags. So we look at phone and email if it's registered with external accounts, so social media accounts, things like that. We'll mark that off so that we can understand if this is a potential good actor. And we look at, is it a disposable phone number, like a voice over IP number? Is it deliverable? Has it been compromised in a known breach? Which is actually kind of an interesting signal, because if your email has been associated with a breach from 10 years ago, that actually is positive, because we're seeing that it's being used, right? And it's an active email versus an email that was just brand new yesterday. We fingerprint the device when the user is signing up. So we see how many sessions they've created over the last day, month, year across the Plaid network. So you're able to get a better understanding of all of these potential fraudsters, right? Because we chain link those sessions together, and you can click into each of those sessions and see, okay, this individual created an account from this IP and then used a different, same IP, but different PII. And then maybe they have 20 sessions from the same device, and they're all 20 different sessions. So you're able to do a lot of investigation, but we also are able to help support your own automated fraud policies. Other cool things we're looking at, which I think is the coolest piece of the fraud engine, is behavioral analytics. Right now, we're seeing fraud become pretty sophisticated. You create one barrier, fraudsters find another way in, right? And so the things that are important right now are the intrinsic behaviors of an individual. So things like how fast are they entering information? How accurately are they entering that information? Are they copying and pasting? How long are they on the page for before they go on to the next page? What is the use of how they enter this data? And using those factors, we're able to determine if their behavior is, if their behavior is risky, if they're a potential fraud or part of a fraud ring, if they're a potential bot. All of these things feed into telling us if this is a good user. And you can see here that these are all things that typically a client would have to go to separate vendors to work with, right? One for phone and email, one for device fingerprinting, one for behavior analytics. So all of these things used to be a separate, all separate entities, and you're tying them together as the end user. But as we know, fraud, doesn't act in silos, right? We need to look at things from a holistic level. And so tying them all together as part of the identity verification is what is necessary to really get that holistic view on a user. All right. Also, underpinning the verification is our watch list and PEP screening with our monitor solution. So we're looking at various anti-money laundering watch lists, as well as sanction lists and PEP lists, so politically exposed persons, right? Based off of your own compliance needs, you are able to screen against various different watch lists that we offer. We transliterate across 18 different languages. So even if a name is in a different language, we can pull back across those different languages. We have a lot of different matching algorithms to account for fuzzy matching. One of the biggest issues we've seen in this space is that the number of false positives is incredibly high, right? The likelihood of you having multiple drug lords on your platform is low, but the number of false positives that you have to wade through does often really bog down your team. And this is another issue for fines in this space, right? I'm sure most of y'all know that this can be an exhausting endeavor. And if you let these pile up and you start ignoring these watch list hits, not clearing through them, then you are susceptible to high fines. And so creating a system that intelligently makes sure that the hits that you're seeing are good, and then giving you the platform to clear those hits and have your team clear those hits on a consistent basis is what's needed to really clean up this backend system here. We offer ongoing monitoring. On our end, the cadence is daily. If you enable our ongoing monitoring feature, then we will rescreen your users daily. And we think a daily rescreen is important because if you just think about when the sanctions on Ukraine were implemented, if you weren't screening on a daily basis, you may have been doing work with individuals that were on those sanction lists, and you might have not caught that for weeks, right? And that would have been subject for fine. So we want to make sure that we are keeping you compliant while giving you the tools to clear through any potential hits that you have. And finally, our no-code full suite solution and management experience makes it easy for compliance officers and product officers to change the needs, to change based off of their needs. So oftentimes when you're working with other vendors, you need to plan each one of your changes in a dev sprint that lasts weeks or months, and it becomes an exhausting endeavor, right? Compliance becomes an afterthought because, oh, if we want to change that rule setting, if we want to change how that onboarding experience looks like, if we want to pull different data, it becomes such a much more difficult process than it is worth it to some people. But as we know, compliance is a very important piece of any business, any financial services. So we wanted to put this in the hands of our compliance officers and product officers who are the ones making these updates, right? And so you can go after you integrate, which typically takes 1 to 2 weeks at most. We've seen people do it in a day. After you integrate, all of these changes are editable through our dashboard. So if you want to be more strict on a certain rule within your onboarding flow, you can make those changes very easily, and we can help support you through that. So during this process, we'll walk you through what are best practices for what we see. At the end of the day, I'll take a line from Mark. We are not lawyers. We are, or at least not your lawyers. So ultimately, your decisions will be up to you, but we can help support you, customize your rules for you, and work with you to make sure that this onboarding flow makes sense for your team. And if you need to change them, this isn't going to be a multi-week endeavor, right? You can decide what you need to make changes to, and honestly, roll them out day of. So overall, why Plaid? I'll actually let Mark wrap us up here.
Yeah, thanks, David. So there are a bunch of numbers and things that we can give you afterwards about how great Plaid IDV is. Here are some of them. The 90% pass rate is a significant one when you are trying to get users onto your platform and activated. And the 30 seconds or less is really a key metric in helping them do that. The second one is just a breadth of coverage. It's the broadest number of documents supported as far as we're aware, which just gives you a greater reach, a greater ability to scale if you plan to expand beyond the Canadian market. But the real magic sauce to this, in my opinion, having worked on similar products in the Canadian market, is the fact it's all integrated. So everything from Plaid, you access via the single Plaid SDK. It's one integration. You not only get the data source verification, you get all of the fraud stuff that David has talked about. You also can, in addition, have users connect to their bank accounts, which is just a further strong, rich data feed for you to assess your risk and assess whether or not you're adequately meeting your legal obligations. I'm going to preemptively answer one of the questions here just because it kind of ties into that. So one of them about, do we have confirmation that our platform is compliant? That's not how regulatory compliance works. It's not like an ISO standards where you get a certificate. It's on each company who is subject to the regulations. That's your companies need to decide for themselves, have they met the regs? And that's what your lawyers are for. That's what your advisors are for. What we are giving you is the tools to make that much, much easier. And I will preemptively also answer one of the other questions is, and one of those requirements are reporting requirements. And yes, we do have the data sufficient that's necessary to meet those reporting requirements, depending on which of the methods that you choose to use. All right, give us 3 seconds just to recheck the Q&A list. David, do you want to take the top one about sanction and PEP list testing?
Yeah, definitely. So we do offer bulk testing. So if you need that, we can help support that. So if you want to compare us apples to apples to whom your current vendor is, no worries there. We run those type of tests all the time. Let's see. And
I will then take the next one, which is about, does Plaid IDV, I'm reading this out because I'm actually not sure if the bigger group can see the questions for themselves. Does Plaid IDV allow for document-specific flows? Thinking if a specific flow can be set up to collect specific data points. You can, correct me if I'm wrong, David, you can choose, which documents are applicable for your use case. The only thing I would call out is a SIM card is not an appropriate piece of ID in Canada to meet the government ID verification method. So if you are looking for a roundabout way to collect that information for ulterior purposes, this is not the process. Maybe I'm being overly cautious here, but if you're looking for that data for other reasons, you need to get it for a different reason. This product is focused specifically on confirming IDs that you're meeting certain know your customer requirements for AML regs.
Okay, so there's some questions about minimum monthly spend and cost. So if you want to reach out to sales, we'd be more than happy to help answer any questions about what cost looks like. We gear ourselves, we have clients on both ends of the spectrum. We have startup clients that are just getting going, and then we have clients that run thousands, hundreds of thousands of new users per month, right? So either end of this, like we can help support, just feel free to reach out to our sales team and we'd be more than happy to have that conversation of how we can do a potential testing, how we can do testing for you or how we can help support you.
Yeah, so do you want to take the white labeling one quickly, David? And then I will take the credit one.
Yeah, so the question is, can user experience be white labeled? So yes and no. So the data source verification, the PII verification can be white labeled in that we will operate on the back end when we are verifying your user, but the document and selfie screening does need to be through our panel. So we typically do recommend using the modal because with it, we can help support a lot more of the fraud engines that we run because we can measure the things like behavior and whatnot when the user is going through the modal versus if it is just through the API version of this.
I'll take the underwriting one. So the short answer is no. And that is because when you are making a call to somebody's credit file in Canada to identify their ID, it's what's called a soft pull. So it has no effect whatsoever on their credit rating and doesn't show up in the same way that what is referred to as a hard pull does show up on their credit report. So there is no way to do both in one pull. This is for the purpose of using a credit bureau for the purpose of identifying ID, because that's what FINTRAC guidance says is a reliable source to do so. In a sort of related note, like if you choose to have users connect their bank accounts, our transactions endpoint, which is transactions that exist in a financial account, we do have clients that are using that data in very innovative ways to underwrite in addition to a bunch of other data points as well. So there are definitely ways in which you can use Plaid for a credit use case, but it's not specifically the credit bureau pool that we use for IDV.
So I'm going to answer the question on, since you have recently acquired Cognito, are there any advantages of using the Plaid platform directly compared to Cognito? So I have I come from the Cognito acquisition, and I think what's really cool about being now plugged into the Plaid network is it's just the ease of using the Plaid solution, right? From one API integration, you're able to have access to not only identity verification, but then bank account linking. And there's already so many cool things between the two. Like we have a solution that pulls back account owner info. So you can use the verified information in the IDV solution to then match it against the account owner info to confirm that the person who's connecting their account is the right person who just was verified. And then there's a lot of other things we're rolling out this year where you'll be able to see connected accounts as part of the identity verification portal. So it adds into that trust aspect. And then we also have what we're launching called the Plaid Fraud Network, where it'll be this consortium of clients on that Plaid works with feeding into this fraud network, right? We're going to be able to see markers from fintechs and then banks, and then they all feed into the system so that we can see potential fraudsters across the board, which is going to be a great tool against synthetic identity. That's such a big issue right now within this space where, with third-party fraud, it's really easy. It's not really easy, but you have someone that's being hurt, right? Or someone that's being defrauded, signaling to the credit bureaus that, hey, someone stole my identity. But with synthetic identity, it's so much harder to catch because there isn't someone doing that signaling, right? And so when you are able to monitor that bad behavior and feed it into a system, that's going to be such a cool feedback loop. So all of these things are expedited because we're part of the Plaid network. I don't think there's any other solution out in the market that has this offering, that has this identity verification plugged in with this open banking that is leveraging the two in a way that really can help support the anti-fraud measures that we're seeing come out because of the sophistication and fraud.
All right, let me answer a couple more of these as we go. The question about some of your material mentions checking a user against an authoritative source. So so in Canada, the phrase is actually reliable source is the phrase that FINTRAC uses. Authoritative source is the US standard. They're substantively the same. That relates to the dual process method. So the dual process method gives you some flexibility in not defining specifically what the sources have to be, but they have to be reliable. And there is some guidance from the regulator on what that means, but accepted sources, as I mentioned, include things like bank account information, utility information, statements from financial accounts, those kinds of things. The other one I can deal with, I think, pretty quickly. Health card accepted as a valid document for AML. This is really a question for your lawyer to answer, but as far as I'm aware, it's not considered a valid, but that would be something that I would double check for yourself. And then how do we stand compared to other industry players? There are basically a few ways. In certain areas, like our conversion rates are higher, I would say. But the real magic sauce to this, which I have yet to see from a competitor in Canada, is the integrated nature in it. So I have not yet seen a competitor in Canada that gives you this waterfall approaches, including PEP, including bank accounts, through one integration, right? That's why we're all very happy because we've been working so hard on this and we're launched. But I really truly believe this is something that you don't yet see in the Canadian marketplace, even from some of the other. I'm not going to name other companies, but if you are really actually interested in it, I would encourage you to find some time with us, look at a demo, do some testing of our product, because we're quite confident that it's a winner.
Yeah, and I want to double down on that, because I just think it's so cool how all of these pieces play into each other, right? Like I was saying before in the demo, what we see across the Canadian market is that you have a very disparate system. Most clients use multiple different vendors and try to plug into each other and speak to one another. But in terms of fraud prevention, it's just not an effective way to look at a user, right? A user is coming in as a single individual, and they're coming in with all of this sophisticated fraud attempts. You need to be able to capture all of the details on this individual and see them in one place. And Plaid really offers that for you. And whether it's through the identity verification aspect, whether it's through the bank account linking, whether it's through our other fraud prevention tool, Signal, those are those items that we need from that individual to really know if they're going to be a good actor on your platform. And currently, what you have to do with any other vendor is go to multiple vendors. And just even from a business operations standpoint, that means you're setting up multiple different contracts, and then you're setting up multiple different developer resources to integrate them.
Do you have a video? Do we have a video demo?
We do. So yeah, just reach out to sales, and we can definitely set that up so you can see how our Canadian verification works. Does IDV confirm data submitted by the user versus what's on the ID? Yep. So part of the verification in a document flow is we OCR the information from the document and we verify it against what was inputted. That is part of one of the fraud checks. So we'll want to make sure that that is the right user. So in the first piece of it, right, we're checking that inputted data against our reliable data sources. And then in the second piece of the document verification, we take that verified information and then compare it against that document information. So it adds in an additional layer of fraud prevention for you, rather than just doing the document verification portion.
And I think what this question is also alluding to, for the for certain elements of various parts of the methods, which I won't get into the details, there is a comparison element to the FINTRAC. The wording in the method is compare. And so the short answer, as David already answered, is yes, like the information gets compared.
Yes, there is a sandbox environment we don't offer live data in the sandbox environment just for the nature of this product. It is a compliance solution that you do input PII. So because of that, we don't offer live data, but we can talk about how you can test live data if that is if you are interested.
Are there plans where the Plaid bank account linkage is integrated with this service? So it's integrated to the extent to which it would be the next step in the flow. So it's designed that it goes from one to the next. The bank linking flow, which is called Plaid Link, doesn't sit in the IDV flow itself. It is an addition. It sort of not an add-on. I don't want to make it sound like an afterthought, but it is the next step in the user journey. And you as an institution can decide whether or not you use the linked bank account, what you use the linked bank account information for, as long as obviously it makes sense with your use case. But to sort of go one level deeper, two specific endpoints that a lot of our clients use is ID, which is the information about the person, name, address, telephone number, etc., and what we call auth, which is basically confirming the details of that person's account, which can be used for not only ID purposes, but also for fraud purposes, especially if you're looking into money movement use cases like account funding. That's particularly helpful because one of our sort of unique positions in the ecosystem is we are the network in the middle. So we have line of sight on where a user may be connecting her accounts in other places that other folks don't.
Does Plaid offer a similar product on the US side? Yep. All right. So what's really cool about our solution is that expanding globally is incredibly easy. Once again, as part of it being no code, when you want to expand to other markets, you can just check a box within the backend system and then choose your own, like what documents you want to allow from that country, how you want a user to move through the workflow. Do you just want to do the data source verification, or do you want to do fallback to document, or do you want to do both? You get to customize that experience. It all takes just a couple clicks within the backend and makes it very easy to launch in any other countries. We are incredibly strong in the US as well. Our pass rates are above 90% in almost every market we work in. So that is not, that should not be a worry for anyone looking to expand globally. In fact, it actually is a huge positive because then you have a consistent workflow for all of your needs, right? Like if, let's say you want to expand to certain business lines, or you're acquiring new companies, or you're going into new markets, they can all then have a consistent workflow that your end user will be used to versus trying to merge all of these different experiences.
I just say there are a few questions coming up in here about, what does Plaid do if there is fraud, and what is its role in investigations? So I think I said it earlier, but I'll just repeat it anyway. It is up to the company. So essentially, you folks, if you're offering products, financial products to users to determine, to manage this risk, you are the one who needs to be compliant with FINTRAC and what you are doing. We are just giving you the tools to do it. We are giving you the data so that you have a richer input into making all of your decisions. So all that is a little bit of an indirect way of saying, like, we don't do the investigations. We are not like a BizOps company that just runs this part of your business for you. We are a very good tool that helps you do it yourself.
Yep. And in summary, those tools include a data source verification that covers credit bureau, credit file and dual process verification, document verification, selfie check, fraud analytics, so things like behavioral analytics, IP address, email, network, AML watch list screening, PEP list screening, and then a back-end management system for you to get all of this within one place. So if you're interested in getting started with us, check out these resources. Please reach out to one of our team members to see how you can get going or just started testing with us. And also check out, we have a Plaid Academy tutorial. So you're more than welcome to watch that to get a little bit more of an overview. We will be sharing this this deck out after, or we'll be sharing it via email tomorrow, so you'll have access to this. But yes, please just reach out. We're more than happy to have this conversation at a one-to-one level, and we love talking compliance. I know Mark said he's not a lawyer, but he loves the talk. Okay, so we're excited to be chatting with y'all.
Thank you very much for joining us.